Well, welcome to Guerrilla Discipleship. My name's Kevin Baker. I get to be your host again, and I'm so glad that you've joined us. I had the privilege this week of being on a phone call with one of the foremost or premier disciple-making movement leaders in the world, Dr. Ila Tassi. He's originally from Kenya, and he has been a part of starting several movements, thousands of churches planted, amazing things that have happened. And so it was a great conversation. And while Kenya and the U.S. are different in a lot of ways, one of the things that is similar is that Kenya is a fairly churched nation, as we are. You know, a lot of churches, a lot of cultural Christianity that exists. And so as we were learning about what was going on in his life, someone asked him the question, what do you see as some of the biggest obstacles to disciple or making disciples in the U.S.? And I thought his answers were amazing. The first thing he said is, well, you're an affluent nation. Your people are by and large very affluent. And I think that is, Jesus said it's hard for a rich man to get into the kingdom of heaven as it is a camel to go through the eye of a needle. It is hard. We have so many material possessions, so much that we are longing for that dying to ourself and following Jesus becomes a hard thing for many of us. But the focus that I want to spend a few minutes on today is another issue that he said that he thought was really causing difficulty for disciple-making efforts in America, in the U.S. And let me, before I got a little show and tell for you, before I give you any illustrations, let me just remind you, at its core, discipleship is relational. Jesus was unbelievably relational. He made disciples by spending time with people, by getting to know them, by having dinner with them, by touching them, by laughing with them, by being a part of their lives. And he showed them how the kingdom of God was available right where they were, regardless of who they were, and that they could see the power of the kingdom, and they could actually access the power of the kingdom and the love of God, who is that king, if they would desire it. It was available to them. That's really the message of the gospel, that there's good news for those of us who are lost and lonely and frightened, that we are not stuck to our own devices trying to figure out how to live life on our own, just doing the best we can. But there is a God who created us, who's already forgiven us on the cross of Christ and inviting us into a relationship of abundant life in him for eternity. So he said this, he said, one of the issues that's creating difficulties about discipleship and disciple making in the U.S. is how compartmentalized we see our lives. And I thought, boy, that is so true. So I did some artwork for you. I know that you're going to like this. So if you look at this, this is the way many of us see our lives, right? We have our home life, we have our work life, we have our church life, we have our school, hobbies. You could add as many, but we see them often as totally disconnected. Now, if this is the way Jesus lived, you probably are enjoying not seeing my face for a minute, right? But if this is the way Jesus lived, then he would have never really made any disciples because his life wasn't integrated. But for Jesus, complete integration of his life. He didn't have this idea that, well, I'm in the synagogue now, and so I can speak about religious things, but I'm in the marketplace. Jesus did more disciple making in the marketplace than he ever did in any religious place or institution. And so Jesus had an integrated view of life. Now, I want to say again, this idea that my home and church and work and hobbies and school, all of those things in my life are in different compartments is not true anyway, but it is how we often see our lives. We fail to realize, and so here's my beautiful drawing of what life is more like, is that our hobbies, our home, our school, our church, our work, are all overlapping. They all connect, and they all connect around us. because we're the common denominator. When I go to work, I'm the same person as when I go to church, as when I'm out with the family, as when I'm with friends doing activities, whatever. And the reality is, when I begin to compartmentalize myself, when I act one way in church and a different way at work or at home, I'm actually hurting myself, because the truth is, what's going on inside of me is influencing every aspect of this. And one of the reasons why we have been not as effective at making disciples as we could have been here in the church in the West is that we have limited spiritual conversations to just church. We've been convinced ourselves that there are places for religious conversations or conversations about spiritual matters, but those happen in buildings that we call churches or mosques or temples or whatever it is. And so we've said, okay, let's set that part of our life for a special occasion, special time. So some of us, in effect, are really only Christians between 9 and 10:30 every Sunday morning, or 11 and 12:30 every Sunday morning, or whatever the time for your service is. Or maybe we're Christians then, and then maybe we've got a Bible study. But we fail to see the integration of our lives with our hobbies and our friends and our coworkers and our time at home with our families. And so I am inviting you, and one of the key principles of making disciples is to begin to see that Jesus invited us to make disciples as a lifestyle wherever we go. Disciple making isn't something that you put on and put off. I'm not married only when I'm with my wife. I'm married all the time. Marriage for me is a lifestyle. I'm not a pastor only when I'm in the church. I'm a pastor as a lifestyle. And so it's not that I wear a pastor label or that pastor label somehow is a coat I put on when I'm doing pastoral things, and then other times I'm not a pastor. The reality is, it's part of who I am. It's an inescapable part of my calling and my lifestyle and my thinking. And Jesus is inviting all of us, if we're going to be effective at making disciples, to begin to allow him to have lordship over every area of our life, and to allow him to integrate our lives, that we would be the same person in every one of those situations, and that we would begin to see that making disciples has to be a lifestyle. It can't be something I do 1 hour a week. It has to be something I'm always thinking about, because God is constantly bringing to us opportunities, people, interactions. And one of the things we've been discovering is that there are open opportunities to pray for people, to have spiritual conversations, to invite folks to see and discover God's word, to talk about how Jesus has made an impact on our lives, to share the good news of the kingdom everywhere, at ball games, at family functions, at work events, in the quietness of a couple of folks at work sharing a coffee break together. There are always moments, but if I keep taking my faith in Jesus, my discipleship self, and I put it on the shelf, except when I'm around other Christians, well, we're not called to make disciples of other Christians. Jesus said, go into all the world. In other words, our goal is of course, to always strengthen the brothers and sisters in faith that are around us, but making disciples has more to do with reaching out to those who are far from God and helping them to know what it means to have a relationship with God, showing them in very practical, gradual, easy, step-by-step ways what it looks like to all of a sudden allow God to be a part of everything in your life. That's the joy, that's the abundance. And Jesus modeled that for us. Jesus modeled discipleship and kingdom living in every arena that he was exposed to. Didn't matter if he was talking to political people or a very sick man, the Gerasene demoniac on the other side of the lake. It didn't matter whether they were out fishing or if they were on a mission to do something. It didn't matter. It didn't matter if he was at a funeral or a wedding. Jesus was a disciple maker. And you and I, if we want to be more effective at making disciples and usable in God's life, in God's eyes with our life, and having a life that's more abundant, we've got to begin to integrate. We need to go back to my drawings. We need to go from all these different aspects of our life being so separate and independent from one another, which is a lie, of course, but that's the way we sometimes allow ourselves to think, to realizing we are living integrated lives under the lordship of Jesus. Our homes and our hobbies and our churches and work and school and friends and family, our good times and bad times, they're all integrated by the same person. And Jesus wants to use us, bless us in every single one of those situations. I'm hoping today that you will be encouraged to begin to break out of and break down those false compartments that you and I put our life into, and that you'll begin to say to the Lord in your own personal walk that you want him to be a part of every aspect of your life, your dating life, your work life, all of your life now begins to be under the lordship of Jesus Christ. And it's an available time, no matter what you're doing, for you to be thinking about, looking for opportunities to bring healing and peace, to have spiritual conversations, to pray for folks, to talk with them and invite them to know the God who loved them enough to die on a cross for them. Thank you so much for being a part of Guerrilla Discipleship. I'll continue to try and work on my drawing, but I'm glad that you were with us today. And I'm glad that you and I together are beginning a journey of lifestyle discipleship that is going to change the world. God bless you, and we'll see you next week.